Well, that was pretty close. Hello, everybody. What a great music that is. When you hear that, it's time for another episode of the Rec Poker Podcast. It's the Forums edition today, which means that I'm your host, Jim Reed. I'd like to thank the Running Aces Racetrack, Casino, and Hotel, Learn Pro Poker, website AMP, and the small business community for making this podcast possible. Every week, the panel comes to join me to talk about poker. Every week, we take a forum post from the Rec.Poker forums and we talk about it. Every week, we're trying to steal each other's blinds in the Rec Poker nightly home game on Poker Stars. And tonight, we are going to talk about donking. But first, I'd like to introduce Chris Jones, who will tell us a little bit about himself.
I'm Chris Jones. I'm 5x5 on Poker Stars and Twitter.
Oh, he's John Somsky, and he is muted from some other channel somehow. But he's Poker Geek MN everywhere.
That's right, exactly what I was saying.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 everywhere.
And we're going to be joined by a special guest, but first I just want to say that we are starting a new program here at Rec Poker, the Rec Room. I don't know about you, when I was growing up, we had this room in the basement with wood paneling and shag carpeting. It's where the kids used to go to have fun. And that's what we're doing now in the Rec Room. If you're a premium member, you can join one of our Wrecking Crew members to just chat poker, have fun. And whether it's going over a hand or talking about a subject, a specific topic about poker, you can talk to Chris Jones, John Somsky, Rob Washam, myself, Steve Fredlin, Taylor Moss, Woody Adams. I feel like I'm missing one in there, but it's a good crew. Email me, jim@rec.poker, and tell me which Wrecking Crew member you'd like to talk to and what you'd like to talk to them about. We'll get it together, and hopefully you'll be hearing a version of that Rec Room episode coming out sometime soon. But tonight, we are joined by Kim Pet Vet, one of the new, well, since the summer, I guess, anyway, members at Rec.Poker, who has been tearing it up in the home games and making herself known in all our video webinars, making a name for herself. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Kim Kilroy, yeah, Fergie56 on our home game. Pet Vet pretty much everywhere else, and self-described poker addict. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Truer words have never been said. We love that. We've got a Socratic learner with us, which is our favorite way to do things. So today we asked Kim to lend an ear and to talk to us about donking. So there's a post here that actually Kim posted herself. It's called "Facing Donk Leads as the Pre-Flop Raiser." And we've kind of talked a bit about donking before as part of a certain player's strategy where they were just extremely aggressive with extremely wide ranges and small sizes almost on every street. I think today we're talking more about sort of isolated donks and donks from players that where it's not part of their overall plan, or at least it doesn't seem to be. So Kim, what is it about donking or these examples in particular that made you want to bring it in? How would you like to start the conversation?
Well, donking's, always been out there, but until I started playing these home games, I didn't come into contact with it quite as often. And I've noticed it's something that's used quite often in this, in the home games. I've been playing since the end of August, and over about 100 games, I found about 100 instances since then where I've been donk led into as the pre-flop aggressor. So I wanted to look at all of those hands to see if there was some sort of, a rhythm to what people were doing that made sense. So I saw that there was usually I looked at a few scenarios, one with one big blind donk lead, one with a pot size or close to pot size, large, and one sort of with a middle, like half pot, 1/3 to 60% pot size. And they all sort of, I didn't obviously see all of them to the river, but I did notice a trend among them.
And are you looking at these now in Hold'em Manager or Poker Tracker 4 or some kind of, is that how you're reviewing these? I
review them in Hold'em Manager 3, yeah.
Cool, yeah, awesome.
So I did, reviewed them all.
Lovely.
So Which one would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so why don't we start with this first one here? So I'll just lead us in. So blinds are 300, 600. It's 8-handed, and the hero's quite deep with 93 big blinds. Under the gun has ace of clubs, queen of spades, and opens to 2 big blinds. It folds around to the big blind, who has 23, who call. So the pot's 5.5. The flop comes 8 of clubs, 9 of diamonds, 4 of clubs. And again, the hero has ace of clubs, queen of spades. Big blind leads for 1 big blind, puts that 1 min bet out there into a pot of 5.5. So what does that make you think about?
Well, first of all, I just want to talk about, I was the big stack at the table, and the average stack at this table was probably only about 20 to 25 big blinds. And both the small blind and big blind were fairly short. So that's why I only raised to 2 big blinds rather than what I might use normally from a 90 big blind stack. So yeah. I was going for effective stacks.
And I think that's something that a lot of players don't pay enough attention to, which is really more about what's the average stack, or what are the stacks of the people that are actually going to be involved in the hand. That's what you should be picking your open raise sizing by. So great call.
So this was sort of a hand I played early on in these home games, and I hadn't really faced this 1 big blind donk lead before very much. So I really wasn't sure what to do. So when I don't know what to do, and I think a 1 big blind lead doesn't mean much, I raised. So I raised it to 3 big blinds, which I don't think is probably enough because the pot was 5.5 big blinds. But I did raise it to 3 big blinds, and the big blind called and had 18 big blinds behind. So the pot's now 11.5 big blinds, and the turn is the 6 of spades. And the big blind leads for 1 big blind.
So at this point, I always think they've got like 1 low pair or something like this. I don't know why, but that's what I always think when I see this. What about you, Chris, or other guys with your?
I was just going to say, I think I know probably who this player is at this point, but that was just what I was going to say. Because I think there's a player that likes that min bet lead into you donk lead. But if they do it on 2 streets, I think there's really only 1 player I'm thinking of that does this. But
there's a few of them out there. I have a few of them.
Really? Okay.
but at any rate, I just was like very perplexed and going, what the and I just shoved. Because I really don't know what else to do here. It's really, we can talk about ranges and all of that, and for my particular hand, it's not hitting me at all, but I just feel that this 1 big blind screams so much weakness, and I get a snap fold. So, if they want to do that and they have the goods, they're going to get doubled up.
I was going to say, I'm making a note right now. Next time I see you in the home game, to start leading in with that 1 big blind when I've got top set or something.
Yeah. I don't know if I do that now, but at that time, when I was first playing these games, and I really didn't understand this lead. And I realized that there's more than 1 person that does it. There's quite a few players that utilize this 1 big blind lead, and I've started doing it a couple of places myself.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, go ahead.
It's really maddening. Like I find it much, when we're talking about donk leading, when somebody, if they, when they lead out for, anything between the half pot to full pot or whatever, like, I feel like I know what to do with that. I feel like we'll probably talk about, I think your next hand sort of talks about a bigger sort of donk lead, but when they do this little dinky donk bet, it just throws you back on your heels. Like, what is going on here? It's really it's a really annoying bet. Like, it really is.
I think what I normally would do is treat it as a check. And I would normally do whatever I was going to do anyway. Whether it was c-bet, I'll just add a big blind or 2 to it. And if it was check, I'll just still check. Or I'll just call. Call the 1. So I'll treat it as a check, but do whatever I was going to do.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. That's what I tend to do as well. Treat them like a check, although do adjust the pot size to include that bet in there as well.
Right.
And that has been a theme when we do talk about donking, and when we talk about very small bets in particular. This concept of sort of like treating it like a check, I think, is one of those good general rules that we love. We love little general rules. Does that mean that you are just weighting that player's hand towards a weak holding, like
Yes.
100% of the time there?
And I when I went through all of these, I found that for the most part, the one big blind, and a couple of instances, it was top pair weak kicker, but most of the time it was weak.
And was it like a made hand weak, but like just like one low pair, or I guess well, you don't have to draw that kind of specificity.
I don't always know.
Yeah,
Right,
good
right,
point. And
right.
even when this is even only when they go to showdown that you get to see. Sometimes from the action, you can tell if they fold to a small bet on a future street, they couldn't have had that much on there anyway. But
Yeah.
so
for the 8-9-4 board with your ace queen, what if it had been checked to you? What would have your action been?
I would have probably bet, yes, I would probably bet about 35% pot on that. I have a queen of clubs for a backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, and 2 overs with my particular hand, and I still have all the overcards, all the sets, and like all the overpairs and all the sets there. I can have 10 jack even as the big stack on the table, even though it's an under the gun raise.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just normally bet like a 35% or so.
What would have been
somewhere
interesting
35 and 50. Yeah.
if they would have come back then and instead of donk leading into you, done the check raise, would have you continued on that?
It depends on how big a check raise. But if it was 3.5 times my bet, I would probably not continue.
Because that board,
but I think I'm supposed to continue.
Well, the board is technically better for the big blinds range, right?
Yes.
In 8-9-4. So, yeah, that's the only reason why I can think that there would be the donk lead is because it's supposed to be better for him.
Right.
But
these one big blind donk leads, though, are not generally relevant to me from what I've seen.
So they're not range related type actions where they're saying, well, my range hits this better than your range, so I'm going to do this. Basically, it's somebody saying, well, I caught a little piece of this, let's see if they're for real.
And I think one of the problems is that using that small sizing, they're not really putting anyone to a real decision, right?
That's correct.
I mean, that's the real problem with it. I don't mind donking as a strategy in certain situations, but you have to do it to a sizing that actually gives the other person a decision. And I don't think that was accomplished here with the min lead.
Right.
And I mean, sort of in the same vein, your raise on the flop there to 3 big blinds. I think that's the same kind of thing, right? Where they're calling almost 100% of the time there, do you think?
I mean, they're much shorter than I am. They have
good point.
Big blinds.
Yep,
but
good point.
I think that I probably should have made it more of a pot size raise, like to 5 or 5.5 big blinds. So,
yeah, then you're really leveraging.
Then I put them to the test. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had some conversation about this before. When you see a min bet coming out like that, you almost treat it like a check.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then look at what the pot size is at that moment in time, and then make your decision based on that.
Right.
And I think go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, and you know, if we're going, like, you know, I know the question isn't really about implementing this strategy, but I think if we're going to consider, I'm not even saying this is probably a great, like, I think there can be some situations where we do donk lead, but I think if we're going to implement a donk leading strategy where we come out with a min bet, we probably want to be doing that with a huge portion of our range and including all of our nutted hands, just for the hope that, and I think, you know, we do it when we have like a 23 big blind stack, when we're really just trying to get this person to sort of be like annoyed with us and put those 5 big blinds in that they probably otherwise wouldn't, right? I think I guess that's got to be the strategy, is like, I'm going to annoy this person into making a big bet when I have the goods. I mean,
yeah, I think if you wanted to construct a range that was appropriate for a one big blind donk here, it would have to be very wide, I think. And I think to John's point earlier, donking and check raising kind of go hand in hand. Every time you donk, you're just removing the opportunity to check raise instead. And I think a lot of these hands that people are donking with would really play better as check raises.
Yeah. Agreed.
Whether they're for value or not. Yeah, Kim.
I'm waiting to see the donk one big blind and then raise on the when it gets raised.
and I think that's part of it is that
I mean, you have to be able to do that if you're going to do this strategy, right?
Yes.
Like you have to be able to get that 5 big blind from you and then shove on them or something, and then they're like, oh, maybe you really do have something good here.
Yeah, I don't think it happened even once.
Yeah,
that scenario.
And I think that's something that our listeners and our members can really zero in on right now, which is that you should have a plan for future action when you take your own action. So, and you should be anticipating the different ways your opponent could respond. So this feels like someone made a decision based on just this one action alone and said, I'm just going to put one big blind out there and see what happens, and did not have a plan for how to proceed. And I think donking in particular, if you don't have a plan for how to proceed, just don't donk. Donking is this, just don't. It's this weird part of the decision tree. We were sort of talking about this earlier where it's not, you don't have to donk to be good at poker or to win at poker. It's just one of the tools available to you. If you're not going to do it in a well-constructed and organized way, just check raise, check call, or check fold instead, unless there's something about this particular opponent that you want to take advantage of. Like I don't donk very often. When I do, it's mostly because I have a tell on my opponent that they either fold a lot to donks or they stick around, and I, choose my holdings accordingly. Chris, did you want to jump in?
Well, you had 3 hand examples here, and the third board that you presented is the closest kind that I actually like to donk on. All low paired board, I think is the best kind. The one thing about the board here is I'd like it to be rainbow. All low rainbow paired board is the ideal donking board for me, because I can still have really strong hands in my check raising range, but I can donk out with some more stronger. So I can donk out, and like if it's a 7-7-4 board, I can donk with some 7s in my range. And it's in that situation where you, as the pre-flop raiser, probably don't have that 7, but are in a kind of a pickle now because I really can have it. So like those are the kind of boards I like donking on, but for the most part, I don't employ it either.
But if you put that in your donking range, what do you have in your check raising range?
So I have all my full houses. I have all my if it's a 7-7-4 board, I've got all my 5-6s. I've got all my 7-4 suited. I've got my pocket 4s. I've got my pocket 7s. So I've got my really strong value, and some of my sort of strong draws are in my check raising range, but some of my weaker 7s are going to be in my donking range.
And so is that mostly to do with the range of your opponent as well, as opposed to, and their perception of your range as well, right? Yeah.
In that particular hand, and we weren't going to talk about that hand, but it was a raise on the button. So the button has all the 7s as well.
Most of them, you'll have more of them for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, you'll have all the 7s, and they'll have a good deal of them.
I would say that they often won't. The big blind often won't have the pocket pairs. Won't have flop full houses, and won't have flop quads, because I think versus a button, they're probably raising most of the time.
I think a lot of players
pocket 4s.
Pocket 4s are calling. Most of the ones I see.
I'm calling pocket 4s
when they only have 20 big blinds and the button raises. That's getting shipped every time in my book.
Maybe.
Villain dependent, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the things.
That's
one of the things that makes poker so great, right? Is like a lot of it comes down to who's actually in that chair across from you.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we keep talking about too, when we get into some of these strategy discussions, we're assuming everybody's playing perfect
Right.
poker. But to Kim's point, if she was playing that 20 big blind stack, she would never do that. But there are players that would do that.
Right.
And so now it's trying to understand where that opponent is on the tree, the knowledge tree or the studied tree, I guess you could say.
Right. Okay, so let's just talk about that, because I found in my studies that that sort of 40 to 60% pot size bet, or 35 to just over half pot size bet, was often a weak pair, or like it was weakish but made hand. So for most of the part, I found that, and we can talk about the Queen of Hearts, Nine of Hearts hand, because that's more of a almost pot size bet, and that also meant something different as well.
Yeah, why don't you take us through the action on that hand there?
Okay, so the blinds are 300, 600. The action folds to the hero in the hijack with 56 big blinds, and hero opens to 2 big blinds. Small blind with 4 big blinds calls, and the big blind with 24 big blinds calls. So
we're holding Queen of Hearts, Nine of Hearts. Yep.
3-way to the flop, and we have Queen of Hearts, Nine of Hearts. The pot is 7.13 big blinds. The flop is Queen of Diamonds, 8 of Diamonds, 6 of Clubs. And the small blind leads for almost a pot size bet of 6 big blinds. So a very large bet. Big blind folds, and now the action's on the hero. So this is where I left it. And I wondered what people would do here. And then I'll tell you what I would do.
Yeah.
What I did.
And how do people feel about the difference between the stab with 1 big blind and this much bigger proportional bet? Does that, just as a general rule, does that tell people anything about it? Or is it any alarm bells going off or anything like that?
I tend to read this as much more likely that this player has a made hand. May not even be that strong, but definitely has a pair. Probably a weak queen, or something, but I don't think they've capped themselves too. Like, I think their strongest holdings right here are probably queen, jack, maybe king, queen.
I'm blocking the queen, so.
Yeah, right.
Maybe
but as a rule, I think that's their strongest holding that we can possibly put them on.
I agree, but I think there's also a lot of flush draws in their hand, in their range. Some of those ace, baby, X of diamonds.
Okay. All right. Well, I raised because that's what I do when I'm dunked into.
yeah. I'm writing it down.
And I think my raise was too small. I raised to 14 big blinds. They led for 6. I raised to 14. But they only had 34 big blinds to set the hand, so I thought this was still putting them to a decision.
I think it is.
And small blind calls. And
that's weird.
Leaves themselves with 18 big blinds, and there's 35 big blinds in the pot.
So do you think this is the kind of player who does that with the absolute nuts because they're waiting for you to hang yourself and they don't want you to fold if they raise? Or do we think this is the kind of player that does it because they want to see if they're going to get that diamond and then decide,
I think that they must have known I was committed to calling them when I raised to 14. So to me, if they had the nuts, they should have shoved right then and there. If they had a nutted hand, like a set, or, like a straight draw, flush draw kind of thing. So they just called. The turn is the 10 of hearts, and which brings me in with a gut shot, straight draw for my particular hand. Small blind shoves, and I pretty much snap call because I'm getting such good odds on that. Rivers up brick, 6 of spades, and the small blind loses with ace of diamonds, 9 of diamonds.
Hey, good call, Rob. He had that pegged the whole way. Yep.
And one of the things when I was looking at these was those middle to large size bets are often flush draws.
Interesting.
When they got shown down. often.
Interesting.
And
I
so
didn't obviously see all of them, but a lot of them that I saw, those bigger bets were flush draws.
now
Which I thought really interesting. Donk bets.
yeah.
The bigger donk bets. Yeah. And
'Cause
some of the more middle ones that I got shown down were like a top pair weak kicker kind of thing. Like they had a good made hand.
And I kind of get that, not leaving donking out of it a little. Like I don't mind bigger bets with hands that have low showdown but high equity, and you want to get as much fold equity as you can out of it because you're hoping to just scoop it right there. But if they do call, at least you've got this this diamond coming like it always does. I don't know how that, like, stack sizes really come into it for me at that point when it comes to sizing. And I'd probably be more inclined just to ship that, maybe. I don't know.
I think, yeah, see, 34 big blinds to start the hand is an awkward size.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when they make it so big on the flop, they're kind of committed. So
100%.
when you're going to make it that big, why not just ship your
Mhm.
stack in, right? I mean, just try and take the pot down there.
Right.
You know, I
And
like
it also-
if you stay with game flow instead of donking, I think you're in better shape.
Mm.
You know, you could do something like a check raise, which would look stronger to me than the initial donk.
Yes.
Yep.
I'd much rather be check. And I guess that's one thing I wanted to think about here is donking's a great example of how you can't just look at their donking range. I think you should look at a player's entire range and then extrapolate what you can from that. Like if you're playing against someone who check raises a lot, that tells you something about their donking range. If they don't check raise at all, that should also tell you something about their donking range.
Right.
So and if you get a lot of hands on people, like in my Poker Tracker 4 database, hardly any players are donking at higher than like 7%. So whether it's just the weakest 7% or they only donk the nuts, like it's just they're not doing it in a balanced fashion. So a lot of it comes down to, like, what are the assumptions that this player is making that's leading them to make this donk?
Right. Yeah.
So John, yeah, you want to jump in there?
Well, I was just going to think, I think from a psychological point of view, you're just trying to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like you're in a boxing match, so you throw a little jab that's not going to do anything but keep the other person away from you. And that's what this is too. I think it's a defensive move. So if you want to use it well, you have to realize that, I think Kim was right, it does kind of telegraph weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to incorporate some of those times where it would also be strength. The problem is it's not used very often, so it confuses people, which means it makes it very difficult to use that in a manner where when you are strong to get maximum value.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard to be balanced with a donking range.
And the fact is, with your bluffs, you're going to get more fold equity out of a check raise, plus you get more money in the pot already. And for your value hands, you're also going to get a bigger pot. And I just feel like if I had to choose between only being able to donk and only being able to check raise, I would never donk again, as much fun as I like saying it.
Right.
So when you let me go back to sort of your response to this hand. If small blind, after you raise, if small blind shoves, what's your plan?
I think I'm committed to the hand there.
Okay.
Like with their stack, if they have a much bigger stack, I'd have to think about folding because I just have a weak queen and a, backdoor straight draw kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But I have sort of a two-way backdoor straight draw.
You got the double gutter, yeah, and yeah, that's right. The old double gutter.
the 6 works for me.
So I guess if we could sum it up, we'd say that donking tends to cap people's ranges. It tends to be a middle strength holding. Bigger bet sizes in this group anyway tend to correlate to more drawing hands, and most of the hands that we're seeing people donk with are not hands that can call a shove, which is part of it.
They're trying to, it's almost like a block bet.
A blocker bet. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that. Yeah, which is weird. I mean, the flop is kind of a weird time for a blocker bet in the traditional sense. You don't really get to control the pot. You don't really get to choose how much goes into it at the end. And the hand hasn't played out enough to know the final strength of your hand. But I think that is how people are using it. I think that's what they're trying to do. I think Rob just had some bad news in the home game.
I had ace king and I folded the turn and the river was a king.
Oh.
And the other two players both had ace queen with a queen high board. So I was like, ah!
No, Rob, it was a good fold.
Yeah, right. There you go. Yeah, that's it, Kim. Can't be results oriented. All right. Well, any other points we want to make on donking generally? Are there spots we're going to look to donk? Are there ways we're going to take advantage of other people donking? Is it just, for me, it's so player dependent. I kind of have a couple approaches that I take depending on who it is, and
I have a few more hands I'd like to go through if we do our study groups.
Oh yeah, great. That's a lovely idea. And actually, I'll just say right now, since I won't turn down a segue like that. Chris Jones is running the Focus, a monthly study group where we all get together and focus on. Right now, we're looking at pre-flop ranges, but that'll change over time. And I'm setting up a couple, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, where we can get together and talk about some of that stuff a little more regularly as well. So keep an eye out in the Rec Poker forums, join the group, the Focus, and see if you want to get together on maybe a Thursday or a Saturday to chat more poker, because we do love that here. Okay, well, I guess with that all being said, donk or don't donk, but have yourself a plan. And I plan on coming back here again next week to talk to all these wonderful folks. Thanks to Running Aces, Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, Learn Pro Poker, Website AMP, and the small business community. See, Steve, it's not that hard.